Welcome to EWA's FIN-LYT podcast. EWA is a fee-only RIA based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We hope all listeners of this podcast will benefit as we deep dive into complex financial topics that we will make simplified for you. And we hope that this really serves as a catalyst so that you can make the best financial planning decisions for your family and also save time. Welcome, everyone, to this week's FIN-LYT by EWA podcast. Joined here by Jamison Smith, and today we're going to talk about credit score. What is it? Why is it important? When you have it mastered, why it's not that important to track it, other than some general things you should do on a month-to-month, year-to-year basis. And then we're also going to talk about for if you have kids or if you need help repairing your credit score, what are the quickest ways to do that? So, Jamison, let's start with giving us a first. Just a basic overview. How does credit work? Hopefully with some clean analogies we can use to clearly describe it.
Yeah. Well, just so your credit score, what is your credit score? It's a three-digit number between 300 and 850. It basically shows your credit worthiness. So the worthiness of a lender, what's the risk of them lending you money, basically, is like simplest terms. So if it's higher, obviously it's good. If it's low, it's not good and you're at a high risk. Basically, there's a good analogy I like. It's like if you were to climb up a ladder, like the higher you get on the ladder, the higher your score is. You just have access to more lending, lower interest rates, basically better deals on what any bank would lend money to you. And there's different ways we can climb up that ladder, which we'll dive into.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to use a couple analogies here. So there's a couple of points. So there's people we've seen that obsess over their credit score and they track too much, and it's not going to boost your financial well-being once you hit a certain level. And then there's also, people that have a good financial well-being that don't use any credit that actually ends up hurting them. So I'm speaking specifically like the Dave Ramsey crowd. I don't know if they still use like cash in envelopes to pay bills or whatnot, but you could have a perfect no debt, a good financial plan, and then you have this like fortress of investment accounts, and then you want to go take a loan out, and although you're probably in the top 10% you may not be able to get a loan or even get good terms on the loan. So there's a balancing act here. We don't want to obsess over this, but we do obviously want to have a good credit score, and there's simple tactics to get there. So let's first, so there's 3 credit reports. There's Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. You can also use some websites to get a free look at your score. These are estimates. So for example, like Credit Karma, Credit Sesame, these are free websites.
Experience free.
Yeah. And so the Credit Karma and Credit Sesame, those are just estimates. If you want to get your actual credit score, you have to pull it from the 3 agencies I just mentioned. So with that being said, let's dive into how is your credit score calculated. There's, I believe, 5 factors, correct?
1, 2, 3. Yeah, 5.
So, James, let's start with the first.
So first one, which makes up 35% of your score, it's a payment history. So basically just paying all your bills on time. If you have any credit card balance, you're at least making the minimum payment or paying it off. But if you go on one of these sites, it'll show like for each account you have. So if you have a credit card and it's been open for 2 years, it'll literally list every single month in the last 2 years and show you if you've made the payment or not. Absolutely.
And literally this one is the least amount of your control because it just takes time to solve this issue. If you don't have credit and you have, each month isn't going to factor into getting a good payment history. So if you're looking to put, your credit score on steroids in a quick amount of time, this is one that's out of your control. But in general speaking, we are big believers in like points and maybe utilizing welcome bonuses with different credit cards. We have, Bryce Conway was on the podcast a couple weeks ago and talked extensively about that. I personally do that. But if you have, because of this exact reason, the payment history, if you have a credit card you've had open for 10 or 15 years, that one you're always going to want to keep open. And then new cards, it's okay to open and close once you have a rock solid score that established. So the second one is amounts owed. So this is also referred to as a utilization factor. So if, for example, if you had, Jameson, $10,000 worth of credit available and you were consistently spending $5,000 a month, your utilization factor would be 50%. Well, ideally, you want to keep that below 10%. So if you're going to spend $5,000 a month, ideally, you want to open up $50,000 a month worth of credit so that you're at that 10% level. And this makes up 30% of your score. This is one of the quickest ways to get your credit score up. Is probably the opposite of what most people think. It's basically open up as many accounts as you possibly can and don't use them.
Yeah.
Or don't use them. Use as little as possible, and then make sure you pay it off in time.
Yeah.
On a month-to-month basis. But make sure that general rule of thumb, utilization under 10% is going to be really good. And the discipline you show, if you have 50,000 available that you could spend, you're only spending 5,000 or less, and you are paying it off on time every month, is going to do wonders very quickly to your credit score.
Yeah. And one thing to note, this is not like tracked historically. It's just literally at the time of the report what your utilization is. So you could have it 100% for your whole life and then pay everything off, and then you're good.
And then suddenly you have a 10% utilization, you're good. So this is, like literally the quickest one. And I think Bryce actually used this analogy, but it made so much sense to me. Like if you're taking 2 college classes, you get 1 A+ and 1 D, your GPA is not going to be good because it's the average of the 2. But if you take 10 college classes, get 9 A's and 1 D, well, the average of that's you're still gonna have a rock solid GPA. It's not going to affect your job search after. That's the same when it comes to a lot of credit score, having a lot of accounts, low utilization, etc. That's going to make, if you do make a misstep, it's going to make it negligible, versus if you have one account and make a misstep, you're going to see a huge impact immediately in your score. But if you have a long withstanding and a lot of cards, low utilization, you make one misstep, just like the GPA example, it's going to have very little impact. Or if it does, it's going to be something that you can recover from very quickly. So, okay, next up is length of credit history. So James, how much of a factor is length of credit history, and how does that determine?
This makes up 15% of your score, and this is just the amount of time you've been using credit. So what's interesting is, like you mentioned, the oldest account you never want to close, which is true, but it's the average of your accounts is what makes this up. So you could have one account that's 10 years old, and then all the other accounts are brand new, and they're gonna come meet for an average. So definitely keep the oldest accounts you have open, but I guess realistically, the more older accounts you have will actually help this too.
Awesome. 10. Then the next 10% is just new credit. So get new credit inquiries, soft inquiries, and then there's hard inquiries when the credit is actually pulled for, if you're getting a mortgage. This impacts the score the greatest temporarily. Your FICO is only affected by inquiries over the last 12 months. And there's a special rule if you're applying for a mortgage and you're chopping it around different vendors, different institutions. If you do this all within a certain time frame, it's not going to count as multiple inquiries. So make sure that if you're working with a mortgage broker that's independent, or a banker, and you're doing multiple, make sure to do this all within a short window, so it doesn't ding your score, and you can get the best rate. Okay, so next up would be, and last but not least, is
just the types of loans or credit you have. It makes up 10% of the credit score. But so this would be like, mortgage, student loan, credit cards, what type of loan do you have?
So with those 5 being said, the payment history, just discipline, amounts owed, the utilization factors that you can control right away. Length of credit history obviously is out of your control. New credit, that the hard inquiry is obviously in your control, and the types of credit use is in your control. So just a quick rundown of what's in your control, what's versus not. So let's talk about what's a healthy credit score. Like, so 850 is perfect. I always use the analogy of, like, if you can get to, let's say between me and the wall is perfect, and I can spend 1 hour and I can get 90% of the way there. And then every hour I spend after gets me halfway closer. So then 90 to 95. The first hour got me to 90%. The next hour got me to 95. And then halfway. Well, first of all, doesn't matter how many hours I spend. I'm never reaching the wall, right? If I just get halfway closer. So there's a point of diminishing returns with credit score. So once you reach a certain score, it's just bragging rights, but you're not going to get any better deal than anyone else. So Jamie, what's the sweet spot there?
So, Yeah, 740. Basically, if you're above 740, you get the same treatment as 850. So 680 is considered good. Realistically, if you're over 700, like you're going to get good treatment. And then anything above 700 to 740, really. And then above 740, it's really like not.
I've heard 760 thrown out there too.
Oh,
So
really?
I would say 740 to 760. If you're there, forget about it. I mean,
Yeah.
if you go above that, I would say, you know what, you're probably not being aggressive enough with new credit card bonuses for free travel. So anything above that, if you have an 800, I have a 750. We're getting the same mortgage rate.
Yeah.
We're getting the same car loan rate. We're getting approved for the same kind of stuff.
Yeah. And then if you're over 700, really, you'll get, you're not going to have any issues with anything for the most part.
Absolutely. So, why credit's important is if you have a high net worth, there's going to be inopportune times if you're in a high tax year, if you're in if the stock market's down, you want to, let's say buy a vacation house. We don't want to sell a stock at a loss. We don't want to sell something that's going to trigger a tax when you're already in a high income bracket. So the way around this is you can take a secured line of credit. You can take an unsecured line of credit against your house. So credit, even if you're high net worth and you're financially independent, it's still important because it's going to give you short-term options, take it out, then pay it off with cash flow so you can stay efficient in your long-term financial plan. And if you're not high net worth yet, it's going to be crucial because there's going to be several steps, going from high school to college. Most likely you're taking out school loans. Those school loans are going to be the start of your credit journey. And then after that, make sure we're paying on time, depending if they're forbearance or not forbearance. But then after that, getting a credit card under your belt, using it responsibly, that's going to set the tone and discipline really for the rest of your life. As you go to purchase a car, as you go to purchase a house, maybe you take out a loan to start a business. All of these huge life decisions are based upon you having that credit score, 740, 760 and above. Okay, so Jamison, let's talk about if someone had a bad credit. Let's say you're a busy doctor, you missed one payment, didn't mean to, you're just, working 80-hour weeks in residency and you missed a payment on your school loans or a credit card. How do we repair that in record time? What are some steps and ideas we can get that back on track with?
So the first thing you could try, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You could go to the lender. So if you had a credit card and it's with Chase Bank, for example, call Chase, tell the truth, but spin some story about, why you missed the payment.
I was busy at work.
Yeah,
I was 80 hours. I was on call for all week.
And then put it in writing, write a letter to them, and then basically ask for forgiveness. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's the first thing. Sometimes they'll just fix it for you.
And that's a low time commitment. Just write it, send it.
Yeah.
Done. Okay.
And then, first you'd want to try to do that. If that can't happen, like you said, it's kind of out of your control. You just have to let time play out. We could try to, depending on what your credit score is. I mean, if it's low, you don't want to go apply for new credit cards. But if it's, if you're able to get more cards to increase the limit, that's an option. But we basically want to just clean up as much as you possibly can. So first thing would be ask for forgiveness. Second thing, pay off any of the debt that you can, to get under, to get the utilization down. And then, don't close accounts generally, because then that's going to, like we said, the utilization, the history and everything that could throw that off. And then from there, basically make sure you're making all the payments on time going forward. And then, those are kind of the low hanging fruit ones. We'll get into the credit piggybacking, which is another one, but anything I missed?
Yeah, no, I think the credit piggybacking those are all, amazing. And if you have someone, that, you trust is disciplined in maintaining a good credit, and then they trust you, so let's just say, using my example, I have a 5-year-old daughter. Let's just fast forward. She's graduated college. She's missed a payment. And we're trying to get her credit score, boosted back up. I can add her as an authorized user to one or all of my credit card accounts. And let's just say I've had those accounts at that point for 20 years. She's from that point moving forward going to start to get the credit for all those on-time payments, utilization factors. So within 6 months, her credit score will almost be unstoppable. Now, when I do that, a common misconception is she'll have to have a credit card or she'll have her own account. She won't. I can add her as an authorized user. They send me a card in the mail. I can keep that. She doesn't see it. She doesn't see, even have access to the card or the account, but she's going to start getting all of that. And if she does bad stuff in other credit cards she has, it doesn't affect me because this is just my account. So credit piggybacking is a extremely efficient, quick way to help a loved one repair their credit score with zero risk. Again, just would recommend you don't hand the actual, supplementary card to the person you're helping. Just put them on and watch their score increase, pretty quickly. So I think a good analogy with credit score is if you educate yourself. I think there's three categories of people. There's people that, educate themselves through parents or through school, and they get the school loans. From there, they make the right steps moving forward. I would use an analogy. That's like a boulder that's already moving. You kind of have to keep your finger on it to keep it moving. And then there's a person that's not educated that makes a big mistake. Well, to fix your credit score, there's a lot of work you're going to have to do. You're going to have to be on calls. You're going to have to ask for those forgiveness letters. You're going to have to ask someone to piggyback. You're going to have to slowly build it up over time. And so I use that analogy. It's going to take a long time to push that boulder. But once that inertia is started, then you're rolling forever. And then the third type of person would just be someone that overly obsesses with a credit card score of like, let's try to get 850 instead of like focusing on other metrics like net worth, cash flow, income, tax efficiency, etc. So credit score is not something that we look at as a measure of financial health. It's just a check mark as part of a financial plan. We want to make sure that boulder, that inertia is carrying us forward. But once it is, it's not something we want to focus on. We just want to use it for our advantage and make sure that we're never at a disadvantage when opportunities come up to borrow money. So just a general guideline to maintain good credit: never carry a credit card balance past its due date. Keep the utilization rate below 10%. Don't ever worry about small swings. There's going to be rather 30 or 40 point swings I see on my Credit Karma. I know that's a fake score. I open and close accounts all the time because of, free welcome bonuses on credit cards. I'm not worried about that. But I know if I have a big purchase, if I was going to go buy a new house in the next 12 months, I'm not going to be that aggressive 12 months in advance because those hard inquiries can affect me up to 12 months. But if I know I'm chilling, I've got the car I'm going to drive for the next couple of years, I'm in the house I want to live in, why does it matter? If my 780 score drops to 730, even below that perfect, it's irrelevant to me because I know I'm not going to ask anyone for money. But 12 months in advance, that's when I want to taper back and just keep using the accounts I have and maybe be a little bit less aggressive, etc.
Yeah.
And then once at 750, I never worry about trying to improve my credit score because at that point it's irrelevant. There's so many other good things I can focus my time into for actual financial health, like I just mentioned. So, anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things. Number one, we should have mentioned this in the what goes into your credit score, but a couple of misconceptions. Like I've heard people say like, oh, I like went to medical school, or like I'm like credentialed. Like why was my credit score low? Like there's a lot of things that have nothing to do with your credit score, other than those things we mentioned. So it is kind of not that it necessarily always makes logical sense. Like you could be a high income earning doctor thinking you should have a high credit score, but there could be missed payments or something that like doesn't make sense. And then second thing I think that's pretty important is like, if you are trying to repair your credit score and you've done those things that we talked about, so, you're making payments on time now, you've asked for the forgiveness, you've done the credit piggybacking, and you still have debt that you're trying to get knocked out. A couple of things just to be aware of. So number one, any expensive debt, look to refinance. Obviously this is interest rate depending, but any interest rate you can get dropped down is going to save you on paying that back. So that could be for mortgage, student loans, car, etc. Balance transfers are a good way. Again, once you have the credit score up, you could transfer to a card where you don't pay any interest for 12 months and then pay it off. And mainly from there on out, automate your bills, expenses, and make sure you're not missing any payments going forward. And you should be good to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk real quick about that. So a couple things. So if you have a bunch of credit cards, at a minimum to protect yourself, like set up the automatic payment. Mm-hmm. So you never have a late payment, even if it's not the full thing. Just set up a minimum, like the minimum payment you have to make, and then still go in, have a reminder set to go pay off the full thing each month. But if you find yourself over your head. You mentioned the balance transfers. So if I've got $20,000 of a credit card debt, and I'm like, the interest on this thing 20%, I'm not even gonna afford the interest alone is $4,000 a year. If you find yourself in that position, you can do that balance transfer. That balance transfer is not going to help you whatsoever from a credit score perspective because your utilization is still really high. But we would still recommend that because you can get that 0%, for an introductory period of 12 months. Now, if you don't pay that back, you have to check the terms of that balance transfer because it can
Sometimes
go back all 12 months. If you don't have it paid off within the 12 months, you have to do a balance transfer again. But that can be a good strategy as long as you understand how the balance transfers work. You balance transfer it. Now you have 0% interest. So now you're paying money into it and it's all going towards principal. And then before the 12 months is up, you'd have to do another balance transfer or else a lot of that interest goes back as if it was there from day one.
Mm-hmm.
So some specific, Discover It is a card if you have a low credit score. Generally speaking, they're one of the most forgivable cards you can get if you're starting out with a low credit score. They'll accept you. And that's also a good one for a balance transfer as well. But there's many resources out there to figure out what is the best credit card if you're starting out. What are the best credit cards? There's some premium credit cards if you have a good credit score and you're already established. But it can be a great tool that you can be used to support your life by design. But if you don't manage this right, it could be a great distraction that's now depicting how you live your life. And it's going to cause a lot of stress unless we manage this properly. So, Jamison, thanks for joining. Hopefully this is helpful and look forward to catching everyone next week. Thanks for tuning in to our podcast. Hopefully you found this helpful. Really hope this is as beneficial and impactful to as many people across the nation as possible. So hit the follow button. Make sure to rate the podcast and please share with any friends or family members that would also find this beneficial. Thank you very much.